for change in a society is usually persona non grata with those who have been the beneficiaries of the system. Welcome to On the Record. I'm Ebony McMorris, White House Correspondent for American Urban Radio Networks. And we are going on the record today, and so excited because we're talking about power, policy, and the price of progress for Black America. And where better else can we go than the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies, America's Black think tank. And I'm so excited that we are going to be talking to the new president of the center, Mr. Dedrick Asante-Muhammad. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Before I start anything, because I was driving over, I'm thinking about all the politics that's happening, me being at the White House, and I have all these ancestors in my ear, and I'm like, who? I wonder who you're thinking about. For me, it's Ida B. Wells at times. Sometimes it's James Baldwin, but that makes me want to just hop up and slap everybody in the room
and move to Paris for a while. Yeah, that's right.
And just be like, oh my goodness, I'm a little too woke because I know too much going on. For you, in this time that we're in, who do you have that's coming to mind for you that you think about?
I've been thinking less about an individual and more about a time frame. And I've been thinking a lot, as a new president, I've been trying to dive into the history of Joint Center. Joint Center founded in 1970, 55-year institution, and trying to figure out, what is the appropriate space for Joint Center today and what does it mirror in the past? And I was thinking like 1980, the Ronald Reagan era, right? Joint Center was created in 1970 following the Voting Rights Act, and we're having an increase of Black elected officials, something from like less than 100 to over 1,000, and recognized that there was not a policy infrastructure there for Black elected officials. So really worked on creating that in the 70s, helped spark a lot of different organizations, National Black State Law Legislators, National Black Media Association. But it was doing this, we had like some progress out of semi-progressive policies, 60s, 70s, but then you had the Reagan reaction, the Reagan era that was cutting the Civil Rights Department, was promising to end the Department of Education, was really pushing back on so many of the gains that had happened in the 60s and 70s. So it's very familiar. Aggressively, and very familiar in this 2025 to, feel that same type of attack on DEI, the actual, trying to get rid of the Department of Education, attacking DEI as they attack civil rights. So it seems like that time period. But the positive thing is there was so much built in the 80s with the Joint Center and its policy analysis and working to get more Black legislators, strengthening Black political power, Jesse Jackson's campaigns in the 80s. So just recognizing that this is a time to build, not a time to retreat.
It's funny that you mentioned that because a lot of people are saying, have we seen this before?
Yeah.
Have we been here before? And then some argue we haven't seen this before.
I mean, yeah, I think we have. In that, like, I don't think we, after slavery, right? Like with the Civil War, we had this Reconstruction, which was radical in federalizing power and actually having Black senators, Black congresspeople, Black legislators. And then there was a radical turn against right? Yeah. The building of Jim Crow. I mean, that I think was much more radical than even what we're experiencing now. Now, again, that was 100-something years ago. Most people are thinking maybe in their lifetimes they haven't seen something like this. The 1980s, pretty far back. So many people don't remember the Reagan era. But I think the Reagan era was a pretty radical shift when you're thinking of Richard Nixon was talking about Black economic power, and he was the conservative, right? So there really was a radical shift back in the 80s, and I think we're feeling that again. I think one of the sad parts is at least we had serious substantive improvements in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
This is a reaction where we even all we had was discussion around DEI and a discussion around racial inequality, but there wasn't radical steps forward in bridging racial, economic, or political inequality. And so I think that hurts to have such a reactionary pushback when we didn't even take substantive steps forward over the last few years.
Let's even talk about that. I'm going to skip around a little bit
Mhm.
because I know that you all just had your first convening,
Yeah. Yeah.
this new position, and there was a fact sheet that you handed out, and it said that Black families hold just 44,900 in median wealth versus 285,000 for white families. When we think of that number, because we're always trying to figure out how do we close the wealth gap.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about the progress that we've made. I know that you had written an article, an op-ed before, talking about even the progress under the Biden administration. We still have a long way to go when it comes to this wealth gap.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that came out of that convening, talking about the wealth gap, and give us a picture of Black America? Like, where are we right now?
Yeah, that convening, we called it the Wealth Agenda. We had 2 different panels discussing tax policy and the opportunity of green jobs. We had some great speakers, Andre Perry from Brookings and former Deputy Secretary Don Graves. And so, one of the biggest, we've been planning this since September. So we didn't plan this in response to the election one way or the other.
Right.
So we didn't know what the climate was going to be. But what we found is because there has been such a pushback on, all right, we're not talking about race anymore, where, people feeling that there's an assault on whatever progress has been made, people really appreciated having this where we can openly still talk about, look, here are the problems that are real. Here are things that we need to do to move things forward. And
what are those things? I think people are trying to figure. We know the problems. We see the slashing of and the rollback of everything. And DEI hit America in ways that it didn't think that it was going to hit America.
Yeah.
They always thought it meant either being gay or being Black or a woman. Those are the 3 things people thought. But it's hit veterans. It's hit disabled people, white women, everybody. So when we look at that rollback, what are some of the opportunities? That's what I don't hear discussed a lot at this time.
And I wrote a paper with Algernon Austin from Center for Economic Policy and Research called The Best Black Economy in Generations and Why It Isn't Enough. Because I think it's important to recognize that even in the midst of all this, the tough number about the almost $45,000 in median wealth is that whites have like 285. So there's still this massive wealth divide. But 45,000 is also a record high in terms of Black median wealth, right? So, I know people might not be happy with that, but I've been studying this for so many years. I'm glad to see any progress, that has been made. Same thing with the median income. I think Blacks are around $54,000, which isn't that much money in the scheme of things, but it's still a record high. We have near record low unemployment rates. And politically, we have more Black congressmen, we have more Black senators, we have more Black mayors than we've ever had in this country. So it's, people see the attacks. And I think that's one of the things that's oftentimes been true is there's the kind of the thunder and the noise of what's coming at you. But let's be really clear, what do we have and how we can, utilize the record number of Black elected officials, a greater economic security than we've ever had, and how do we use these tools to keep going forward? I think, people often ask me, how should we react to what is occurring? My thing is, we shouldn't spend all of our time reacting to what other people are saying. We should be talking about how we should identify our resources and how do we continue to build and organize to move things forward. And that's what I think Joint Center did so effectively, and Black Political America did in the 80s.
Right.
That really, led to some, great increases in the 1990s. And this is a time for like internal building, coalition building, and coordination.
Absolutely. Now, in this role, you called this new role the capstone of your career. What do you mean by that? And with everything that you just said, how are you leading the Joint Center? What is the vision for the Joint Center going forward?
Yeah, I've done a lot of different things. Everything from coordinating a college program in a maximum security women's prison to working for Reverend Al Sharpton for a few years, helping him develop the National Action Network into a stronger national organization, to being head of the NAACP Economic Department, to working at various think tanks and nonprofits. So this is the first time where I am the leader of a Black institution that has such an important legacy and history. And one thing I was so excited about the Joint Center is that oftentimes there's a whole bunch of organizations competing for one space. But there really isn't another organization that is focused on the policy and research nationally in DC with those connections that then should be serving as a resource for the NAACP, the Urban League, National Action Network, politicians, even at the state and local level. So, I think the thing that's so exciting to me is that a joint center is needed now more than ever. I have contacts at all different levels, and so I think, and we have this great body of research. So really, the challenge is how do we get it out there and become more publicly engaged in the conversations that are happening today? Because also, I didn't recognize that we're going to be discussing the existence and the possibilities around every area. I mean, every area of government is being reconsidered.
Absolutely.
And so Joint Center needs to be out there, pushing forth the analysis we built over the decades about, okay, what will be helpful for Black people to end the inequality that we've historically had to deal with in this country.
Those who don't know, how would you describe the work that you're doing, the programs that you all have?
Yeah, I mean, so we have four main areas that we focus on. We have technology, we have workforce development, we have government diversity, Black representation in terms of political staff and elected political officials, and then we have a newer space that we're calling tax and wealth policy, because we understand, as the Trump tax cuts, American TCJA Tax Cuts Job Act is going to be reconsidered, that is really going to be determining the kind of future of the budget for the next, years.
Right.
And so recognizing the importance of, as this conversation is happening around tax policy, how are we having a tax policy that builds low wealth, low asset communities and doesn't leave these communities further behind? So, we have these main areas. We do a lot of work with other national think tanks, advocacy organizations, and historically have always worked with political officials, because even political officials don't have the type of kind of research staff that even a small think tank like Joint Center can help provide. And I just want to recognize that there's a lot of great scholars all across the country, and recognizing that Joint Center can't have a large enough staff to have all the analysis, but we can be a base in which we work with different organizations and individuals across the country and help highlight the important kind of analysis and thought that can really help move this country forward.
What are some of the policy shifts that are your top priorities in this year?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing we have really been building up on has been tax policy. Now, it's what has surprised us and probably surprised many people is how much action has been going through executive order, and that has really kind of delayed. I think many people thought that there would be deep discussion around tax policy and we'd be, coming close to a bill already. While I think things have been so focused on redesigning government, executive orders, how people
flooding the zone, which is exactly what Steve Bannon said that they were going to do.
That's right.
Tax policy isn't necessarily a sexy term, so it's not something you're going to see roll out the words of Americans, but it absolutely affects us as we try to figure out what this democracy is looking like at this time.
No, 100%. And tax policy determines, is there money there for Social Security? Is there money there for Medicare? Is there money there for public education? And are we going to have a tax policy that strengthens wealth inequality, or is it going to help bring up those that have been more and more left behind over the last 10, 20 years? So, that's central to the economy of the United States, and trying to have a clear understanding of what policy, particularly as America's Black think tank, we think will have the most impact on African Americans.
We just saw the president release new tariffs in his in the Rose Garden, calling it Liberation Day.
Yeah. I did think it was clever that the head of the Democrats, not Speaker of the House, because the Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries called it Recession Day, and I think that's a concern. Is that, and I'm a little surprised by this, but are we going to tariff ourselves into? I thought the whole fight was we're going to beat back inflation. Are we going to tariff ourselves into another level of inflation that's going to hurt the pockets of everyday Americans and maybe even push the country into a recession? So that's something there's much debate on, and we're trying to get a better understanding of how to
It's hard to
how to
navigate
address it.
around. And you even have Republicans coming out, Rand Paul coming out and saying this is not the way to go, literally going down a list of what happens when America has leaned into tariffs this hard. We're seeing Canada say this is not about to happen. And other countries pushing back. It's amazing to me, though, how hard this administration is leaning in, whether it's on these tariffs and on these executive orders, cutting Medicaid, which they say they're not going to do,
Yeah.
Social Security, but we see what's happening. But all around America, we have these town halls where rural America, white America, has been standing up and saying, not today. You know?
I mean, yeah, I mean, and even people part of the Trump coalition, Steve Bannon, I've heard him talk about. There's a lot of MAGA Republicans on Medicaid, and like don't
But
touch,
we knew that.
don't touch their Medicaid. Like, and I'm still trying to understand because Trump does like to negotiate and likes to say one thing to get to another. So trying to understand like how serious are we about having these tariffs? Are they bluff tactics to try to get some type of trade deal? Thing that concerns me is to do these type of tariffs. Like, are we really going to raise inflation and at the same time cut? They've been talking. I don't believe they're going to get to this level, but Elon Musk has been talking about cutting $1 trillion of government spending. We do understand that if you cut $1 trillion, that's $1 trillion less going into the economy.
Right.
So we're doing all these things that could actually come together to really push for a strong recession. And Trump has always been about the economy growing at the fastest rate ever, but the moves that are happening now seems to be a space that really could slow down the economy in a way we haven't seen since COVID.
Right. We just saw Senator Cory Booker for over 25 hours.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
Stand up, push back against the policies and speak truth to power at a time when Democrats don't really hold that much political power in Congress. But he used his voice. And I want to talk about power, opportunity, and what comes next. We saw that move as some were saying, what are the Democrats doing? What's happening here? But when it comes to Black-led institutions, how can they also begin to fill in the gaps where we see areas where the federal government is retreating?
Well, I mean, one area is obviously we could do more at trying to coordinate on how to better utilize the state and local power. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a record number of Black mayors across the country. And how can we pull together our resources? Because, if you can't move things at the federal level, what areas, where can you move things, right? I think, Maryland's a really interesting state where you have, the only Black governor in the country. I think the third Black person to be elected to a governor position with a strong Black representation in their House of Delegates, and one Black senator there. So, and several different Black congresspeople, and it's a pretty progressive state. So, I'm looking at, well, in those areas where we have opportunity to move things forward, how can we take learnings from that and put them in other parts of the country? And I think it's really important too that we have a serious analysis, a quantitative analysis of what moves things forward. Because I'll say one thing, everyone was talking diversity and equity and inclusion, but it's not really clear, okay, but what significantly moved forward in the naming of these programs? And
it wasn't a whole lot, let's be honest. Because when we look at venture capital money, when we look at what Black folk were really getting, it's funny, the pushback, because when you look at the numbers, we weren't really getting that much anyway. We weren't the biggest beneficiaries of that.
Yeah.
And so, but now we're seeing who was.
Well, and when this is, and this is my concern, is that under the Trump years, the first Trump administration before COVID, and in the Biden administration, there was a recognition because of COVID to flood money in or to really try to pump up the economy. And that is where you saw Blacks get low levels of unemployment. Yeah. You saw some increases in wealth and income. And that's why I'm so concerned now if we're talking about pulling money out of the economy.
Right.
This could really take back some of the important advances we've made over the last 5-6 years or 5-7 years.
As we come to the end, what does true Black economic freedom look like as we get ready to fight or in this fight?
Yeah, true Black economic freedom is having economic sustainability and having assets and wealth that allow you to experiment, try some things that if they don't work out, everything won't fall apart. Not to constantly be concerned that you don't have the money to maintain your housing or to pay your medicine. And so, I talk a lot about, blacks have around $50,000 or $45,000 in median wealth, and whites have 285,000. I'm not so much focused on blacks have to have the same amount as whites, or whites are what we're judging to, but I'm trying to highlight that the majority of African Americans are in asset poverty. And until you have a decent amount of savings that allows you to ride the ups and downs of the economy, you can never move around in the freedom and even in a healthy way that allows you to grow and develop and to even exercise your true power. So,
Right.
That's why it's so, and that's why it's so scary to move away some of the programs that have been essential in providing some type of security, like Social Security, like Medicare and Medicaid, that have been essential, particularly for our elders. And
The fallout is devastating.
yeah, it
The
could be.
fallout is
It
the
could be.
fallout could be devastating as we try to figure out how to work around this. You being here at the Joint Center, me at the White House trying to inform people what's happening, and just everyday Americans, rallying and protesting every day. And we're seeing some of the benefits of that with the Supreme Court race in Wisconsin. We're seeing that with some of the judges' decisions that are pushing back. Surprisingly, I wasn't sure that they were going to push back like they did. We've seen so many people kind of bow down, especially when it came to DEI, corporations left and right, but everyday Americans protesting, places like Target and.
Well, and and what I do think it's highlighting is there are so many different levers of power, and that people weren't considering. I don't think people
Yeah.
had even considered how much Trump could do under executive order,
Yep.
right? People hadn't think about, Cory Booker more as a symbolic act, but taking that type of symbolic stance, or people using the town halls
Yeah.
to really put. So I think there's many people doing protests across the country as it relates to Elon Musk. There's many different ways of leveraging power. And so the question is, how are we going to coordinate and organize? I know National Action Network is going to be launching a new campaign in the next week or two to counter the anti-corporate DEI.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think everybody has to find their space and then figure out how NAN's leveraging of power, National Action Network, can be coordinated with Joint Center for Political Economic Studies. It can be coordinated with the NAACP, can be coordinated with the Urban League and local organizations across the country.
Absolutely. Dedrick, what's your message as we wrap up? What's your message to everyday Americans, to those who are trying to figure out where they belong in this space, that want to fight back? What's your message to them at this time? A message of hope, and then again, just let us know, what the center is really pushing at this time.
Yeah. So, message is, don't get caught up in just the noise. Like, do identify, what are your strengths? And then what are the ways that you can best participate and engage in the political debates and conversations we're going to be having? Not everybody's going to be focused on the massive federal tax bill. Some people might be focused on a local board of education. Some people might be focused on some type of local community improvement. So, where are you best situated to participate in the struggle that's going to be happening every different level? And, for what Joint Center is going to be focusing on, I've talked about the tax policy. We've been having an ongoing campaign around government diversity. They've been hiring new staff and trying to understand, well, it's important for the future of politics about how much Black representation is in these, high-level staff positions in the Congress, in the Senate. But people can check out our work at jointcenter.org. They can check us out on Facebook, on Twitter, or X, I guess as it's called, on LinkedIn. So, please, check us out, sign up to our newsletters, and get a better understanding of what's happening political, economically, nationally, and then figure out what your space is in those battles.
I love it. Thank you so much for joining us on the record today.
Yes.
Make sure that you watch and rewatch and share this, and also visit the center's page so that you can understand the work that they're doing. You can see a lot of their research and their analysis. Dedrick Asante-Muhammad, thank you so much.
Oh, no. And thank you for all that you do. An essential piece is having communication outlets like you to get these types of messages out.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Well,
ma'am.
thank you for watching On the Record.